We don't have a written history before Europeans showed up. Honestly, that's what a lot of us were taught. No cities worth naming, no writing worth reading, just tribes, and then eventually colonizers who brought civilization with them. Now, here's the nuance nobody mentioned in that version. In 1324, a king walked into Cairo with so much gold that he broke the price of gold. Not raided it, not stole it, brought it openly as a routine part of his own treasury on his way to Mecca. His name was Musa, ruler of the Mali Empire. He traveled with thousands of attendants and enough gold dust that Cairo's markets felt it for over a decade. Historians studying Egyptian records later estimated the gold he spent caused real, measurable inflation. That's not legend. That's an economy getting physically dented by one man spending money. This wasn't a lucky king stumbling onto treasure. Mali controlled the trans-Saharan trade routes that moved gold, salt, and copper across half the continent. Salt came down from mines in the Sahara. Gold came up from mines further south near the Senegal and Niger rivers. Mali sat in the middle, and it taxed, protected, and profited from nearly all of it. That's not myth. That's a functioning state running a trade monopoly for centuries. Its capital cities weren't tents. Timbuktu had multi-story mud brick buildings, a university, and law courts. The Sankor Mosque complex alone held a scholarly community teaching law, astronomy, and medicine. Manuscripts from that period still exist today, tens of thousands of them. Some cover inheritance law, others cover eclipses. One debates the ethics of tobacco centuries before Europe reached the region. A society that leaves behind that many written legal opinions wasn't waiting for someone else to bring it literacy. Mali wasn't the only case, either. Roughly 1,000 kilometers south, Great Zimbabwe was rising as a stone city with walls 11 meters high, built without mortar. Its builders fitted granite blocks so precisely the walls have stood for over 600 years. Nobody imported that skill. It came from local engineering traditions refined over generations. On the eastern coast, Kilwa was doing something else entirely. It was trading gold and ivory directly with merchants from India and China, using its own minted coins. Chinese porcelain has been excavated from Kilwa's ruins, alongside coins bearing the names of its own sultans. That's a city running its own currency and its own long-distance trade network, independently for centuries. So, how did all of this get erased from the story most of us grew up with? The mechanism wasn't destruction of the evidence. It was selective attention to it. European travelers in the 1800s did visit Great Zimbabwe, and they did see the walls. Many simply refused to believe local builders had made them. Cecil Rhodes's own mining company sponsored expeditions specifically to find a non-African origin for the ruins. Egyptian traders, Phoenicians, even a lost tribe of Israel got proposed, anything except the obvious answer. Colonial administrations then built school curricula and museum descriptions around that refusal. Generations of children in Africa and in Europe learned a version of the continent's past that had already been edited. The scale of that editing is the part that's easy to miss. This wasn't one myth about one empire. Ethiopia had kept written records and functioning governance in some form for over 1,000 years before European contact. Benin City, in what's now Nigeria, had bronze casting so advanced that when British soldiers looted it in 1897, European museums assumed it must be a European technique taught to Africans. It wasn't. Benin bronze casting predates European contact by centuries. Case after case, the pattern repeats. Advanced infrastructure gets discovered, its origin gets doubted, and the doubt becomes the textbook version. Here's why that particular myth mattered so much to the people telling it. If Africa had no complex civilizations before colonization, colonization could be framed as improvement, a civilizing mission, bringing order to what supposedly had none. If the walls, the manuscripts, and the currencies were acknowledged, that argument collapses immediately. So the emptiness wasn't a gap in the historical record. It was a requirement for the story colonizers needed to tell about themselves. That's the mechanism, not a single lie but a structural incentive to keep believing one. This didn't stay in the 1800s. Development narratives today still lean on a version of the same gap. International coverage of African nations frequently defaults to crisis, famine, and conflict as the baseline image. Studies of Western news coverage have repeatedly found African stories get framed around aid and disaster more than any other continent stories do. That's not a coincidence of what's newsworthy. It's the same old framework, still deciding which parts of a country's reality get shown. You can see it in how developing gets used, as if development only started when Europe arrived to measure it. Mali was minting trade agreements while parts of Europe were still consolidating out of feudal fragments. Development isn't a race that Africa entered late. It's a race that got narrated by whoever controlled the finish line. That framing still shapes how aid money gets pitched, how tourism markets ancient sites, and how history gets taught in schools on multiple continents. The pattern is the same lever, pulled by a quieter hand now. Not soldiers erasing a wall's origin. Just a headline, a textbook chapter, a documentary that starts the clock in 1885. Mansa Musa's caravan eventually left Cairo and continued to Mecca. He came home to a kingdom that kept functioning long after his gold stopped making headlines in Egypt. Timbuktu's scholars kept writing. Great Zimbabwe's walls kept standing, long after the people who built them scattered for reasons still debated among historians, mostly tied to trade shifts and drought rather than any single collapse. None of it needed rediscovery to be real. It only needed someone willing to look at what was already there. Next time you hear a country's history described as beginning with the colonizer's arrival, ask what came before that sentence. Starts counting. Sometimes the answer was sitting in a mosque library the whole time.